Okay, I'm Ron Kagan, CEO of the Zoological Society. Welcome tonight to a very special evening with the Executive Director of GRACE. And if you don't know what GRACE is, you soon will know. I wanted to first, a federal judge is telling me to speak louder, and I never defy federal judges. Sir. Before I introduce Sonia, I just wanted to mention that we're really honored tonight to have a number of other very special guests. In addition to our wonderful community, we have both a number of board members of the Zoological Society here tonight, including our chair, Lloyd Semple, and a number of other board members of DZS. And we also have the board of GRACE here, really from all over the country. These are leaders, great leaders in conservation, many with decades of experience all over the world. And if I can ask the GRACE board to stand up, please, and wave to the crowd, and if you can acknowledge them, please. I could spend 5 or 10 minutes introducing each one. That's how impressive their careers are. So, Sonia is a biological anthropologist who has studied, obviously, great apes for many years, doing a PhD and postdoc at Harvard, ultimately teaching at Bates College in Maine, doing a lot of research on chimpanzees in Uganda and orangutans in Borneo, also getting involved, and I think ultimately when she joined GRACE almost 4 years ago, feeling that academia was not enough. She's kind of an activist, and in a good way, and very, very driven. I will just share with you that the board is enormously impressed with what she has done in her relatively short tenure leading this effort. And I'm just going to tell you my opinion, which is that everybody knows who Jane Goodall is, and 25 years from now, you all will know that you listened to Sonia. And she is a star already, but she's going to be a huge star in the field of conservation. So, please welcome Sonia Kahlenberg.
Thank you. Before I start giving the story of GRACE, I wanted to say thank you, first of all, to Ron Kagan for his amazing support of the GRACE project over the years, but also for being so generous in hosting our board meeting here at the zoo. It's been such a treat to see your wonderful penguin exhibit, but also just to be here together. So I came here, how many people were here at my last talk 2 years ago? Oh great, I have nothing to say. No, I'll give an update, but you know, I came here almost 2 years ago, I think it was October, and for me, it's been really amazing because since that time, we have had such an outpouring of support from the Detroit community for our project. So I just want to say thank you to all of you here who've been following us on social media and coming again here tonight to see this talk, but also to Ron for his leadership of the GRACE project. He's been chair of our board for a year now. So he has to put up with me calling him with various emergencies all of the time. So I appreciate that. And also Dr. Ann Duncan, is she here tonight? There she is. Who actually came to GRACE and helped with a hands-on health check out in Congo for us. And we have several couples who have given very generously to our project. I just want to thank each of them for their support. So I I flew here. I live in Maine now. I'm the U.S.-based director, so I live most of the time in Maine. And I flew here yesterday with my 2 little girls, 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And it was interesting because as we were landing in Detroit, I was thinking about growing up around here. So I grew up about an hour from here in Northwest Ohio. Yes, I'm a Buckeye, sorry. About an hour from here in the middle of a cornfield in Northwest Ohio. And my dad was a farmer. I was an animal lover from the time, ever since I could remember. When I was 17, I started volunteering at the Toledo Zoo and decided, hey, it'd be fun to volunteer with great apes. Why not? So I worked with chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas at the zoo and really got interested in great apes. And so then when I was 19, I marched into my parents' bedroom and said, I'm informing you that I just got a grant and I'm leaving for Borneo in a month. And I'd never even been out of the country, not even Canada, and I went by myself at 19 to Borneo in order to study orangutans. And I remember my mom saying to me, can't you be normal? And if you like animals, just be a vet and stay around here. What's so special about great apes anyways? And I was thinking about that as we were landing in Detroit, and I'm there with my 2 little girls, and thinking about that. What's so special about great apes anyways that has taken me from this part of the world to the opposite part of the world, and seeing lots of interesting things and facing lots of very challenging situations. And I think my mom initially intended for that, what's so special about great apes anyways, to dissuade me from wanting to pursue that, but I said, I'll find out. So I spent the next decade studying chimpanzees in Uganda, and great apes are pretty cool. One of the things that I studied was chimpanzees are known for being tool users, and they use sticks and rocks for lots of different things. One thing that we saw them doing a lot was carrying around sticks and not using them at all. So here you see a female, she has a stick tucked in her groin pocket, carrying it around, and sometimes they'll carry it for an hour, take it up in their nest, and you'll see the females laying on their back, throwing it up in the air. It's really only the females that do this. They do it a lot more than the males. They use it for no other reason than just to play with this object. So this is what we interpreted as a primitive doll use, that's seeing this in chimpanzees, which obviously has a lot of similarities to humans as well. Great apes are our closest living relatives, and there are so many similarities. We have similar DNA, we have similar morphological, physiological features, but for me, always the thing that was most interesting, and I guess I was most passionate about, was the social relationships. And when in the morning I would get up at 4 a.m. and go out and find the place where the chimpanzees had made the nest the night before. And you sit there as the whole forest is waking up around you. And you just can't wait to see what the soap opera is going to be that day. And for me, that was the most exciting thing about studying chimpanzees and great apes in general, is that the complex social relationships are very deep and very human-like in their complexities, in how the tenderness between a mother and a child, and even in other ways. And this is a very poignant photograph of chimpanzees in a sanctuary when one of their members of their group died. And you see the chimpanzees in the background even embracing each other, looking at their group mate. So, what makes great apes so special? It's kind of hard to explain what that exactly is. But when you spend a lot of time with them, you have to be objective scientists and record things as you see them. But for me, there was always this underlying feeling that there's something really special about these animals and sets them apart from other animals, for me at least. And as I was working in Uganda, sort of the complexities and challenges of conservation kind of came crashing down around me. Around 30% of our population was missing limbs or was maimed by snares set by humans who were hunting for antelope, and the chimps would get caught in these. So this is Max, who lost actually both of his feet to snares. And he survived like that. He was able to survive. And that's kind of when something switched in me. And as passionate as I was about understanding social relationships and finding it so interesting, I really wanted to spend more time working on the complex issues of the conservation threats facing our closest living relatives. And since that time, when I made that switch, it's gotten worse for great apes. Here's a picture of an orangutan. So orangutans spend the majority of their time, almost all of their time, in the trees. They don't come down to the ground. And this is a picture taken a couple months ago of a Bornean orangutan clinging to the last standing tree in the forest. The rest had been clear-cut by oil palm plantations. And, working with the Grace Project, so I had worked with chimps and orangutans, and I find it a huge opportunity, but also a great honor to work with Grauer's gorillas. For me, one of the most things I find urgent about great ape conservation is the fact that this is one of the great apes that is most at risk of extinction. And probably, unless you came to my last talk, you probably had never heard of a Grauer's gorilla. So they're at risk of going extinct before anybody even knows about them. So tonight I wanted to talk about Grauer's gorillas and about the project that I feel very privileged to be leading, that is trying to do everything that we can to save this great ape from going extinct. I just want to start with a little bit of background about gorillas to give some context. So gorillas are found throughout equatorial Africa. We have gorillas that live in West Africa as well as in East Africa. And in terms of taxonomy, there are 4 subspecies of gorillas. We have 2 species, Western gorillas and Eastern, depending on where they are in Africa. And then there's divided into 4 subspecies. Probably most of you have heard of mountain gorillas before. Of course, they were made famous by Dian Fossey and her outstanding work in Rwanda. But likely, you hadn't heard about Grauer's gorillas. So sometimes they're called Eastern lowland gorillas. Grauer is the name of the person who identified the taxonomic difference between mountain gorillas and Grauer's gorillas. So Graueri is the subspecies name. That's where they get their name. Eastern lowland is not the best name for them because they actually can range into high elevation too. So a lot of us prefer to use the name Grauer. So this is actually the largest of the great ape. So gorillas are the largest great ape. Grauer's gorillas are the largest of the gorillas. So males can be into 400 pounds. And so they're really the greatest of the great apes. And again, most of you probably never heard of them. So eastern gorillas, mountain gorillas, which are shown in blue here, are found in 3 countries: in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. And Grauer's gorillas are only found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And importantly, they're only found in the eastern part of that country. So first of all, the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the most important countries in Africa for biodiversity conservation. It has the highest number of species for almost all groups of organisms, with the exception of plants. It's second to South Africa in diversity of plants. It harbors a number of spectacular endemic species, including okapi, and 2 of the great apes. So Grauer's gorillas and bonobos are only found in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. It possesses over 50% of Africa's tropical forests, and the deforestation rate, interestingly, is actually low compared to other tropical countries on other continents and in Africa. But unfortunately, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and especially the eastern parts, are not known for their biodiversity necessarily. More likely, you've heard about this area on the news because of the violence that has plagued this region for the past decades. So beginning with the Rwandan genocide that happened in 1994, there was an influx of refugees who came over the border into Congo, and an already sort of unstable situation became more unstable and plunged that country into its own civil war. And although a peace accord was signed in 2003, violence still continues in the eastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's estimated 5.4 million people have died in this conflict, which is more, nothing like that. We've seen nothing like that since World War II. And just like Grauer's guerrillas, where many people don't know about it, I think it's the same as for this conflict. Many people don't realize the huge devastation that's happening in eastern Congo, and that people have been enduring hell for the past 2 decades there. So the impact of this violence on people in eastern DRC cannot be overstated. Millions have been forced to flee from their homes, which means that they're also leaving their livelihoods when that happens. Eastern DRC is also the most dangerous place in the world to be a woman or a girl. So rape is used by armed groups to terrorize and punish civilians, and this happened from the beginning of the conflict up until today. So it's estimated that 40% of the 70 million women in DRC have experienced rape. And a Congolese woman is 58 times more likely to experience rape in her lifetime than a woman in the US. Tens of thousands of children have also been involved in the armed conflict in eastern Congo. Approximately 1 in 10 child soldiers, 1 in 10 children one in 10 child soldiers are from the Congo. So an estimated 30,000 children have been either coerced or recruited by armed groups to join forces there. So a lot of the story of the conflict in Congo is centered around the fact that this is one of the richest countries in terms of minerals in the world. And many multinational corporations are indirectly, in some ways directly, funding the conflict in DRC by buying illegal resources from the area or trading resources for military weaponry. So maybe you've heard of coltan in particular, which is one of the main export resources from DRC that international companies purchase. When the cell phone boom hit in the early 2000s, everyone wanted coltan in order to use for electronics. So there's lots of different minerals found in your cell phones, and DRC is one of the leading producers for all of these. So there was a huge demand for minerals in Congo, and it was an opportunity for a lot of the armed groups that were operating there to make money to finance their operations by taking over mines, even forcing people to work in the mines, and then using that money to buy weapons to further their cause. So coming back to guerrillas, how does this all relate to guerrillas? So again, remember that Grauer's guerrillas are only found in eastern DRC. And in green is showing the major protected areas in this area. And this is showing the conflicts in this area as well. So wherever Grauer's guerrillas are found is basically in the center of what's happening with the conflicts in this area. And you can see all of the mines as well. So the coltan mines are in green, and you see a lot of them centered around Kahuzi-Biega National Park, which is the stronghold for where Grauer's guerrillas live. And at the height of the coltan boom, a lot of people invaded the protected areas to take up mining. And during that time, the guerrilla population was decimated, and around 80% of the one part of the guerrillas there died as a result. And one particularly sad thing about it is DRC was at the precipice of having a very good tourism industry for guerrillas. And some of the guerrillas that were targeted were the ones that were habituated for tourism because they were easy to kill. So we have a lot of internally displaced people within Congo as well as refugees living in Congo. And a lot of people had settled in wherever they could find, and a lot of it happened to be guerrilla habitat. So this is showing in the foreground an IDP camp, an internally displaced persons camp in the foreground, and in the background you see Virunga National Park, which has both mountain gorillas and Grauer's gorillas in it. And of course, people need resources to live, including fuel wood for their cooking and charcoal. And so this was a huge impact on gorilla habitat because people needed resources. And they not only began extracting resources from the forest that gorillas live in, but also even killing gorillas themselves. So a lot of the poaching issue in DRC is due not necessarily to everyday person who needs protein to eat, but really the armed groups who are living deep in the forest and controlling a lot of the mining that's happening there, and using gorilla as food for the people who work in the mines as well as for the armed groups themselves. So as a result of all of this sad story is that the Grauer's gorilla population since the 1990s has declined by almost 80%. So this is a massive decline, extremely worrying, and Grauer's gorillas were endangered and now being, their status is being changed to critically endangered as a result of what's been going on. A byproduct of all of this is orphan gorillas. So typically adult gorillas are targeted for bushmeat. They're killed for their meat. And the young ones are sometimes captured live, and then they try to sell them to a perceived market that is out there. People think, well, it's a small gorilla, maybe I can find somebody to have it as a pet. Some armed groups keep them as mascots tied up in their camps even. And so we started seeing in 2003 a population of orphan Grauer's gorillas showing up in eastern DRC. And at the time, there really wasn't a mechanism to do anything with these gorillas. There was a couple NGOs who did a good job caring for them, but they needed a long-term solution for what to do with gorillas going forward. And I just wanted to show a brief video of gorillas when they come to us, what we see and how we end up meeting a lot of the gorillas that we care for now. This is a typical situation. It's a sting operation where there would be intel about gorilla being held by an armed group or captive somewhere or being sold. And so they pose as buyers as a sting operation to get the gorilla and confiscate it.
Vous serez munis de vos armes. En aucun cas est-ce qu'il faut se servir de l'arme, sauf en cas où votre vie est menacée.
Right, well, the last 3 months we've been in communication with people in Walikale, which is a town not far from Goma. And the people have a whole network of wildlife trade, and they've been trading in baby gorillas, baby chimpanzees, okapi skins, endangered species, and ivory.
Il faut être très vigilant. En principe, la personne ne sera pas armée, mais il faut être très vigilant, très calme pour l'opération.
We're here at Goma Airport. For the last 3 months, we've been running an undercover operation on a trafficking ring in endangered species. I've been posing as a wildlife trader, and today one of them has just taken a plane from a town called Walikale, west from here, and is bringing me a baby gorilla. Right now we have rangers on standby, and we will be making arrests.
Allez.
Faut prendre le téléphone.
J'ai. Ok, voilà, c'est chez les mains. Stéphane.
Stay.
Tout le monde monte, on y va.
Il bouge.
Okay, we want to get out of here now.
Ok, il a envie, mais c'est chaud.
Okay, you go with Eddie. Yes. Okay. In your car. Yeah.
So that's Amani. And when she was found there, that in the bottom of that plastic bag, she had a bullet lodged in her knee. And actually today at the board meeting, we had an update from our vet. And many years later, she's doing quite well, but she's going to have lifelong consequences of that bullet in her knee. She's has major orthopedic issues in her leg. But otherwise, she's doing very well. But that gives you an example of when we get to the point of caring for gorillas, the state that they're in, and really have been through a lot. So since 2003, there's been 20 gorillas that have been confiscated. So that doesn't seem like too many, but if you consider that it's estimated for every one gorilla that survives to confiscation, 4 others do not survive. So gorillas tend to be very fragile, and it's sort of interesting to note that like orangutans and chimpanzees are much hardier species, it seems. They tend to not die when they're orphans and in very stressful situations. But gorillas seem to be very fragile. And so it's estimated that 4 gorillas die for every one that ends up confiscated. And in order for 1 gorilla to show up, the mother had to be killed, and the silverback defending the group also must have been killed. So when you think about 20 gorillas, the number actually becomes much larger than that. So 20 gorillas confiscated since 2003 is a minimum of 280 gorillas and could be even much more than that. So this is all pretty depressing. And people often say, how can you work in ape conservation? It's so depressing. There's not a lot of good news out there. But actually, I really disagree with that. And that's the reason why I am working with Grace and the reason why I'm working with Grauer's gorillas. Because for me, it gives me so much hope that in the most difficult conservation situation you can imagine, we have so many different groups who are working to make sure that they're doing everything they can so that Grauer's gorillas are going to make it. And it obviously takes a lot to do that. You know, it's a very complex situation. We need law enforcement, we need increased security, we need education, we need improvement in jobs and field surveys to figure out where gorillas are. All of that is needed. But for me, the fact that there are so many committed people working in very dangerous situations to make this happen for one of our closest relatives that most people don't even know exists, for me, I find that I draw a lot of inspiration from that and a lot of hope from that. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now is because of that. Our role within the larger conservation picture within Eastern DRC is to take care of the orphans. So caring for orphans has direct conservation implications. So, for example, it is against the law to kill, possess, or sell a great ape, chimpanzee, or gorilla. But you can't enforce that law if once they confiscate an animal, there's nowhere to put the animal. The law enforcement is not going to just keep gorillas somewhere. There has to be somewhere for them to go. So Grace has a very important role to play there. Also, the gorilla population that remains is very fragmented, and the conservation community that's working on these issues feels that reintroduction of orphan gorillas, taking their genetic, having a genetic contribution back into the wild population is something that could be extremely important to have in the conservation toolkit for this subspecies. So the only place in the world where Grauer's gorillas, orphans, are at Grace. So we have a major role to play there with reintroduction. And also with education. So making sure that people understand the laws against poaching, and not only that, moreover, appreciating the fact that Grauer's gorillas only are found in eastern DRC, and it's a treasure that occurs nowhere else in the world. So really invoking that appreciation and understanding of gorillas, and what I said at the beginning, what makes great apes so special anyway, what makes Grauer's gorillas and eastern DRC so special, the fact that this is the only place in the world that has one of our closest living relatives there. So these are the sort of the more direct paths to how caring for orphans is contributing to conservation. But for me, I think even the more important one is the fact that we now have 14 gorillas in our care that each have a name and a face and a story. So you saw Amani's story. She arrived, they were trying to sell her at the Goma airport, and they were carrying her in a plastic bag. The same, we have a story for each of these gorillas. And if nobody knows what a Grauer's gorilla is, but they connect with a story about one of these individual gorillas, these 14 gorillas, by caring for them, they become ambassadors for this subspecies. And we can contribute to conservation through introduction and other ways, but for me, this is one of the most important things we can do as a sanctuary, is really get the story out there about Grauer's gorillas, why they're special, why we all need to come together and support the heroic conservation efforts that are happening in eastern DRC. Part of the reason why we designed our shirts Grauer Power that you saw out on the table there is really to promote that message and that ambassador role that these gorillas have. So here's a picture of Lubutu when he first arrived in 2011. You can see he has almost no hair. He was extremely malnourished. He was living, I think, for 6 months in the village, fed mainly sugar cane. So he had a very poor nutrition for a gorilla, lost all of his hair. And fast forward to 2015 and see him now. And this is a transformation that we've seen 14 different times. Gorillas coming from a plastic bag to healthy gorillas, and that's sort of what we're all about. So how do we get there? Grace is located near the Taina Nature Reserve, sort of the northern end of the Grauer's gorilla range up there in the green. And we built Grace there for a reason, because it's natural Grauer's gorilla habitat. So it's not just a sanctuary along the side of the road that anyone can build. We put it in gorilla habitat so that when the gorillas arrive to us, they can start being gorillas again. And the idea is really looking forward to reintroduction. So this is a rehabilitation project with the ultimate goal of putting them back into the wild to contribute to conservation. So one important way that we do that is we have gorilla surrogate families. So when the gorillas first arrive to us, they have to go through a quarantine period to make sure that they're healthy. But as soon as we can, we introduce the gorillas into a group of other orphan gorillas. And now, with 100% success, what we've seen is the older females in that group adopt the younger ones and take care of them. Of course, they can't feed them. So 83% of the gorillas that we receive at Grace are younger than weaning age. So they still need to have our caregivers give them a bottle. But the females take care of them in every other way than a mother would. Carry them around, protect them in the group, help them learn gorilla life again as they're figuring out being orphans themselves as well. So I wanted to briefly mention the story of Musa to illustrate this transformation that we've been able to facilitate. So Musa was confiscated on the border of Rwanda and eastern DRC and was taken into Rwanda. And when she was there, she was kept at a facility that didn't have any other gorillas. And we tried to bring her back into DRC in order to get her to Grace with the other gorillas. At the time, DRC-Rwandan relations were not very good. It was very difficult to get permits. We tried, and it was very hard. Anyways, it took 3 years to get her from Rwanda to DRC. And we had no idea what to expect because she had been basically alone for 3 years. And she was about 1 year old when she was confiscated. And so years 1 through 4 for a gorilla, your mother is everything to you during that time. She teaches you most of the things that you need to know. And for a gorilla not to have that and to only have a human caregiver during that time, we were very worried with how this introduction was going to go. And so we opened the doors and crossed our fingers, and the gorillas, time and time again, blow me away with their resiliency and acceptance of each other. So we used to have seen a gorilla in 3 years, and the group immediately embraced her. And now you would not know that she, spent 3 years with only humans. She's the most integrated gorilla in the group, acting absolutely normal. So this is what we want to give to each of these orphans who have been cheated out of a family. We want to create a family for them to go back to so that they can have as normal of a life possible going forward. This is Lingu. She's our latest arrival. I think you might agree she's kind of cute. So Lingu was held by an armed group outside Kahuzi-Biega National Park. And when they found her, this was what she was kept in. It was a backpack type apparatus. When I was there in June, I had the opportunity to be there when she was transferred to Grace. So getting to Grace is not easy. It's a very, very remote mountainous area. So we first had to transfer her by plane, and then by bumpy road, but eventually we got to Grace. So I had a GoPro on, those cameras you wear. So this is some kind of rough footage, but you can see some of that journey. She's sound asleep on the plane here. There was no anesthesia. She was just curled up asleep. Here we are with the team, African Roads. We call it the African Massage. Here she is, her first day in the forest once she gets to Grace. It's the first time she had been in the forest since she was taken from the wild. Here's our caregiver up in the tree with her. You can see she's reluctant. Doesn't really feel like going in the tree. But then this happened. So you can hear me on the video a little bit. She goes up on the tippy top of the tree. She's 18 months old. She's very young.
She's making a nest. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
She's making a nest. So this was within her first hour there. She was a little bit scared, but then she's like, wait a minute. I remember how to make a nest. So she goes up to the top of the tree and she makes a nest. That's what we see with these gorillas. They have been through so much, traumatized, but then they come awake and, yeah, I'm in this forest. I'm a gorilla. Here, I know how to do this. So that's very typical that we've been able to see this transformation in the gorillas and something that is wonderful. What we've been able to do at Grace very much depends on our partnership with zoos. So Detroit Zoo, you can see Dr. Ann up in the top there working with our head caregiver, Delmas. Detroit Zoo has been very generous, both with donations but also with staff time, as well as many of our other zoo partners, many of our partners being in the audience today. Gorillas are not easy to care for, and zoos have found that out over the years. It's ever since zoos had gorillas in their care, they've learned a lot about how to do it right. And it's very important for us to partner with zoos because otherwise these gorillas would not be here today, because the skills that we learn from zoos in order to care for the gorillas who are being rehabilitated to go back in the wild I cannot overstate how important these partnerships have been. So we have advisory groups from these different zoos who work with our Congolese staff, both coming to Congo to work with them hands-on there, as well as we have monthly phone calls between DRC and the US-based advisors to train our staff to really be the best possible at grade 8 caregiving that is possible. And it's been truly remarkable what we've been able to accomplish through these partnerships and building capacity within our staff. The other truly remarkable thing about GRACE that makes it different than any conservation project that I've ever worked on or even know about is our link with the local community. So when the local community in this Taina area found out that somebody wanted to build a place for Grauer's gorillas to be rehabilitated, they donated the land for us to build GRACE Center there. And so this is the regional king, local king, laying the cornerstone of GRACE. And they've been involved in every step of our project. Every major milestone that we've had, the community has been there working with us hand in hand. And, you know, is working in conservation depressing? Of course we have setbacks, 2 steps forward, sometimes 3 steps back. But working with this community has really also been an inspiration for me. Just an example, you know, when Musa, the gorilla who lived alone for 3 years, when her helicopter landed and we were unloading her to bring her to GRACE, the local kids, without us prompting them in any way, the local school kids come running out of school and began singing. And they were singing to welcome Musa to GRACE. And they actually composed this song that has all of the names of the GRACE gorillas in it. So I'll just play a little clip of the song. You'll be singing that tonight. And if you can't get out of your head, you can go to our website. It's on there too if you want to hear it again. Why does this bring me a lot of hope? Because this community, you know, I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of the atrocities that are happening in eastern DRC as a result of the violence in this region. So this community has been directly affected in the worst possible ways. The sexual atrocities, the violence where people having to flee their homes multiple times, leaving behind everything they have to be destroyed. Time and time again, they've faced adversity, yet they're celebrating their gorillas. And during the time when, you know, all of this violence was happening, the leaders of this community decided to set aside their ancestral land to become the first community nature reserve in the DRC. So there's huge conservation leadership and ethic in this community that is very important to all of the work that we're doing. And here's one of their signs at their school: "Welcome, dear visitors, the wildlife is safe here." And, you know, I want to tell this story because it really demonstrates how important this community support is. So we had a situation where the government decided that they wanted to take some of the gorillas from GRACE to send them somewhere else. And this was obviously not something that we wanted to do because they were in a family group and they needed to stay there. And it was a very difficult situation because we were sort of standing up to the government that allows us to work there and have permits to work there in their country. So it was a very tense situation. And the local community found out that there was a threat to the gorillas leaving GRACE. And it was a Sunday, and everybody left church and came and formed a circle, or a human circle around the gorilla enclosure to pray for the gorillas so that nothing would happen to them and they would stay at GRACE. I mean, that is such a special thing, and that support is something that I've never seen in any situation that I've worked in before. And their support, especially when we are working in an area that is sometimes insecure and has a lot of challenges, the community support keeps us safe, keeps the gorillas safe, and is the reason that we're able to do everything that we're able to do. So 2 years ago, I was here, and a lot has happened since then. And a lot of it has been because we've done this together. So Detroit Zoo and the Holtzman Wildlife Foundation have made a huge difference for what Grace is going to be able to do for Grauer's gorillas. Because we were really concerned, we were almost at the capacity of our facility. With 14 gorillas, we only had the capacity for 15. And this past year, we were able to, from these donations, to double the capacity of Grace. Now, we don't want one more gorilla, because every gorilla that comes means that a family group has died, and we want the gorillas to stay in the wild where they belong. But they are going to continue coming because the threats are not going to stop immediately. It's going to take time to get there. But because of these partnerships, we've been able to be prepared for the gorillas that are eventually going to come. And this has made a huge difference to how we can now plan going forward. The other thing is we have built the largest gorilla enclosure in the world, a 24-acre forest enclosure, again, in natural gorilla habitat, so that every day the gorillas can spend their days back in the forest. And this is important for their diet, but even more importantly, to relearn the skills that they're going to need to one day be reintroduced into the wild. So here's a short video of them going out into the enclosure on their first day. Here's Amani, the one who was in the bag. So the first time I was there and saw the gorillas go out and climb up a tree again, I have to admit I cried. I mean, it's pretty amazing to think about how much these gorillas have been through and how fortunate we feel that we're able to give them this experience to really be gorillas again in the habitat that they belong in. So in addition to doubling our capacity, to giving them the world's largest forest enclosure so that they can be gorillas, we've also launched a behavioral monitoring program so we can take data on just to monitor how they're doing every day as a group, as individuals. But this is also going to be very important because at some point we're going to have to choose which are the candidates for reintroduction, and we have to make those choices in a scientific way. So we've started the process of that. Detroit played a huge role in our health checks that we did. So we wanted to give just a general checkup to all the gorillas to make sure that they were doing okay. And I can't tell you how difficult this is to do in a remote part of eastern DRC. We had 4 veterinarians, a vet tech, gorilla experts, and we were able to bring the technology to do ultrasound, dental x-rays, and full x-rays to do x-rays on the individuals with orthopedic issues. So this was just short of a miracle that we were able to pull all of this off, including using gas anesthesia in an area that didn't have any oxygen tanks even. We were able to pull all of this off and check all of the gorillas. They're all doing great, but then now we also have a baseline to start looking at health assessments to choose individuals for reintroduction and to follow that up after reintroduction as well. There's Dr. Ann looking at the teeth x-rays. The other thing that we've made good progress on is our education. So an important thing for us is to raise awareness about the laws against poaching and selling and possessing great apes. So chimpanzees also live in all of the areas where Grauer's gorillas live. So they're an important part of that messaging as well as the other iconic species of okapi and elephant that live in these areas. So we're working with our partner Jane Goodall Institute to put up billboards along the 3rd most traveled highway in eastern DRC so that people who are traveling that highway, a lot of them sometimes carrying bushmeat, are going to be exposed to this messaging. And we can't just put up signs and say, oh, we did a good job. We're actually working to evaluate the impact that this messaging has. by doing surveys before they go up and after to figure out how much this message has impacted people's knowledge about the laws that are out there. A very important role that we have to play is to give people their first ever experience seeing gorillas. Because again, we want to not only increase knowledge about gorillas, but really foster that appreciation for how special these animals are. It may seem counterintuitive, but most people who live next to ape habitats have actually never seen a live ape. Sometimes going into the forest is considered a dangerous place for kids and even people, and so seeing apes is not something that most people do. They know they kind of exist and maybe know something about them. But it's really important that people have the opportunity to come to Grace and see what we're trying to do with gorillas and how that fits into what we're trying to do with conservation in general in this area. So we bring school kids to Grace, and we have education programs for them to learn about, here they're learning the differences between chimps and gorillas and how it's illegal to kill them. Also, why gorillas are special. This is a whole lesson plan on that. And I think the most important part of this is really giving them a chance to learn how to use binoculars, but ultimately to look into the forest enclosure and get a chance to see gorillas in their natural habitat and to learn about the individual stories that each has. You can see the gorillas down there with the kids looking on. And ultimately, what do we want from this? We want kids to feel empowered, to care about conservation, and many have said afterwards in the sort of exit interviews that we do that they're so human-like, and they didn't say that before they came. They're so human-like. That's the thing they notice about them, and that's definitely the thing that when I'm studying apes too, the thing that always struck a chord with me is the human-like behavior that we see. Because ultimately, what we want kids to do is to be conservationists. And this is a picture from Rwanda, but I think it applies everywhere. I mean, this is really the ultimate goal of what we want. We want kids to say, I want to be a ranger. The thing that I'm most proud of in terms of progress over the last 2 years is the progress that our Congolese staff has made. So this is Jackson and Becky, who I was actually hoping would be delivering this talk tonight instead of me. Unfortunately, he was not able to get a visa to come into the U.S. But Jackson is our first ever Congolese director and is now leading our program over there. So our entire staff in DRC is Congolese and doing a fantastic job. And like I said, there's been a huge amount of training by zoo staff. This is the Schaefer from the LA Zoo, who've gone over there and trained our caregivers to take care of gorillas. Most of these staff members, when they were hired by Grace, had no experience with animals, really. But over time, we've worked very hard, and now I would say they are the best grade 8 caregivers in all of Africa. They have skills that Beth and others who work with us say that they would hire them in a second in their zoo because they're so good with the gorillas and know how to take care of them so well. So ultimately, we don't want this to be a U.S.-led project. This is ultimately a Congolese project, because if it's going to succeed, it's got to be the Congolese who are taking leadership. And I think I'm most proud of the fact that we've really been able to deliver on that piece of it, because going forward, they're going to be the ones that are going to really make this work. So what's next? The next step is reintroduction. That's the scary step. We had a long discussion today about this. Ultimately, it is going to be difficult to open the door, and these gorillas that have been through so much and have gotten to such a good place, it's scary to think about putting them back into the wild. But I think this is something that is going to be very important, that we're going to do in a conservative way and do it the right way. But this is sort of where we're heading next. So in 2 years from now, I can come back and give you an update on that. But we have identified a potential place to reintroduce these gorillas where they can make a significant difference. So we're now doing the very difficult job of trying to figure out all the complexities and how to approach this, because this is going to be the first ever Grauer's gorilla reintroduction attempted. So exciting stuff, scary stuff, but ultimately, something else that gives me hope is that these gorillas are going to be able to return to the wild. So I just want to end with our new video, give you a look at Grace from the sky and everything else.
Les gorilles vivent dans la forêt. C'est son habitat naturel. Nos anciens avaient conservé ces animaux. Les générations futures, ils auront la chance aussi de voir ces animaux. Ce que nous on est en train de faire, c'est pour que ces animaux-là puissent rentrer dans la forêt.
Tuliweza kuona ke grasi tuitie hapa pembeni, watoto wenyewe watakuyaka nyuma hawataweza kujua kama tulikuwa kana ile espèce ya gorilla.
Grauer's gorillas are the largest primates in the world, and nobody knows about them. It's a species that is endemic to the eastern DRC, and they're endangered. We estimate the population between 2,000 and 5,000 individuals, and we are trying to rehabilitate orphaned gorillas that have been confiscated.
Nice respirations.
When a gorilla arrives here, they have gone through the most horrible things. There's a lot of instability in the area, which has caused habitat destruction and even the illegal trade in baby gorillas. They needed a long-term solution, and that's why Grace was created, a long-term solution where Grauer's gorillas could be rehabilitated, integrated in a family group, and hopefully one day they can be reintroduced into the wild. They live together in a natural forest habitat.
Nous, on prend déjà la responsabilité de leur maman. Sa maman était tuée. Pour le moment, les gorilles, c'est à quel niveau? Chaque gorille est unique et a sa personnalité. Il faut vous concentrer à protéger ces gorilles. C'est ça que nous voulons plus que les enfants apprennent. Les enfants doivent grandir avec cette idée de conserver. Parce que les gorilles appartiennent à la communauté. La communauté est importante grâce à ici. Nous sommes interdépendants. Nous portons main fort, nous entraider pour conserver notre belle nature. Pas seulement pour les animaux, mais aussi pour nous.
Watu waone ke iko kufaida yao haraka bila kukokotana wame.
This is a community initiative, and we are basically doing this together. The communities in the eastern DRC, they are the real future for Grauer's gorillas.
Grâce pour moi aussi, vraiment une maison. Je suis en train d'apprendre aussi beaucoup plus d'autres choses. Les enfants et les enfants de mes amis et de tout le monde peuvent avoir l'occasion là de voir les gorilles.
So I just want to say thank you to our partners in DRC. We can't do anything in isolation, and we have an amazing network of partners that help us at every step of the way. So I want to acknowledge the contribution that they make to this work, and also the contributions of many different organizations and individuals who support this work. We can't do it without you, so thank you. That's it.
So, those of us who are in the conservation field, and there are many extraordinary people who are doing this for a living, can't do it without people who believe in something that, as you can see, seems so unbelievably daunting. And so to really be effective at it, you have to have a very entrepreneurial kind of attitude. And that normally is not language that's used within the conservation community. Fortunately, many communities have individuals who are those entrepreneurial spirits. They understand that even if something seems incredibly tough, that's when you step up and take it on. I would like everyone to acknowledge Patty and Jonathan Holtzman, and I know you're here.
Right
there you are. Will you stand up, please? Come on, stand up. Patty has been... They know I wouldn't introduce you were it not a big story. Patty is an animal lover and has been forever, and has been a volunteer here and introduced Jonathan to what we're doing. And when I talked to them not very long ago about this amazing project, despite, you know, the unbelievable challenges, they really stepped up, and it's been remarkable. And we have, fortunately, at DZS, a number of others who, for a whole host of projects, have also been amazing. But we would absolutely not be where we are right now at Grace without the Holtzmans and everyone else. So to the extent that people can help, please help. I'm not asking you to help DZS tonight. And I understand, I'm not sure if that's even allowed anymore for me to ask for you to help someone other than DZS, because IRS has changed.
Now you're in trouble.
I'm always in trouble. But just by coming here, you're helping, and if you have the capacity to do more for Grace, I would ask that you talk with Sonia or Greer. Where are you? There you are, Greer. Because this is an amazing project, and all of us involved on the board feel this way, and the staff that we send from our respective organizations feel this way. So thank you to all of you. I would like to leave now some time so that you can ask Sonia questions, and she's willing to do that. So we've got about 10 minutes, or up to about 10 minutes, and we have 2 people with microphones. So if you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hand. Please do not grab the microphone. They'll hold it for you.
When you do release these gorillas back to the wild, will they have a tracker attached so you can find out where they are?
Were you listening in our meeting today? Because that's exactly what we were talking about. Yeah, that's the idea, is we're likely going to have to figure out the best remote monitoring technology so that we're able to keep track of the gorillas and how they're doing. So what we need to do is find somebody with the expertise to do that. So we're looking into potentially getting a postdoctoral researcher to work on that with us, not only to figure out the best technology, because again, it hasn't really been trialed in gorillas, but also then to follow that up with the analysis and leading the field team in the post-reintroduction monitoring. So it's exactly what we're thinking.
Thank you for your talk. It seems like, with respect to the conservation aspects of Grace's work, the partnership with the local community is really key, and it is definitely unusual to see that level of a community doing something like donating land. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious how Grace identified this particular place to work. Was it something the community approaching somebody working with Grace? Is it terribly unusual for that region to see a community that passionate about the work that you're doing?
I think that is a very good question. So I think that community stands out in general, but it's partly historical, because Grace actually started as part of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, and the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund was working in that area and actually helped this community set up the Taina Center for Conservation Biology, which was Africa's first college to train Africans in conservation. So the specific purpose of that college was to train African conservationists. So that was already there, and because there was this huge conservation movement and energy in that area, and again, really exceptional leadership in the community leaders, they were the ones who approached the Fossey Fund and said, hey, why don't you build it up here? And it also happened to be gorilla habitat, so it all came together quite nicely. Paul.
Hi. Great talk. All I read about from Joseph Kabila, his second term ending is bad news. But you're obviously much closer. Is that's a pretty worrying situation on the ground there? Yes?
Yeah. So elections are being delayed. Maybe you've seen it in the news. So yeah, that's something that we're watching and hoping is going to have a good resolution. But it sounds like there's some negotiations going on, and really they're trying to set up the electoral process, which is complicated, especially since a lot of people have had to flee their homes and are not in the area where they should be registered. So it's a complicated process to get that going, but we're all hoping that free and fair elections will be happening soon. Yep.
You mentioned the education of the children and the communities, that this is illegal to be harming the gorillas. What is the success rate of finding those who perpetrate this, and what are the penalties?
Yeah, the penalties are monetary. But the success rate in prosecutions is very low. So as part of the larger, so I didn't mention the Conservation Action Plan. So Conservation Action Plan is basically all of the players that are working on Grauer's gorilla conservation in Eastern DRC are working on all of the different issues. So law enforcement and making sure that the penalties are followed up as part of that larger initiative. So that's exactly right. I mean, that's something that needs to be addressed. Grace, that's not within our scope of what we do. But I also wanted to follow up the education point because I didn't mention it here. So in addition to hoping to increase knowledge and appreciation of gorillas, that's really not enough to make a difference. You also have to have some sort of direct actions that people can do. And so one thing that we want to do going forward is to really have some community conservation initiatives that we can support. We've done some past stuff, so food security is an issue in this area. And so we've done some pilot work with teaching women how to raise rabbits and chickens and guinea pigs as an alternative protein source to bushmeat. But we're looking at other possible community conservation initiatives that we can do. Because, and one thing that I really want to get funding for and push forward is conservation clubs for kids. Because kids come and then they say, wow, I didn't know that gorillas were like us, and this is so cool, I learned all of this. But then they leave, and we want to be able to follow it up and keep that enthusiasm and harness it in a way that kids can also feel like they can make a difference. As a mom of 2 little girls here, that's a very important thing for me because, sort of getting off on a tangent, but I feel like many people don't feel like they can make a difference. And I think that especially for kids, to give them even small projects where they can show that they can really make an impact is really important here as well as over there. So that's something that I'd like to do going forward.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sonia. We really appreciate that, and we remain in great admiration of what you're doing and what the team in the DRC is doing. And again, thanks to all of you for coming to support this wonderful effort. Thank you.
Thank you.